Bryan Fischer, a conservative radio talk show host, is going to come out and let us know that Jesus would totally support torture. Now, what's interesting in this clip, Bryan Fischer, this is from his own program. What we're going to do is show this. And this is Bryan Fischer on his own show. Watch how when he's in his own territory, like I am now, comfortably, I've no one here like challenging my opinions or anything. It's quite nice, to be honest. It's a privilege, as many things in my life. Being a white male is much privilege. But Bryan Fischer is in his own domain. He's going to be able to just kind of say what he wants, this and that. And then we're going to stop and then I'm going to play a clip that he was interviewed with Tom Hartman on his program, and watch how he has to fall back into like robotic talking point. So here we go. Let's watch the first Bryan Fischer clip.
Now, here is the problem I have with the way the left is approaching this. We know that war is a nasty business. But the Bible, it's important to understand, is not an anti-war document. Christianity is not a pacifist religion. In fact, if you go to Exodus 15:3, you will find that the Lord there is described as a man of war. That's Yahweh, the God that we served, is described in Exodus 15 as a man of war. Now, we often think of gentle Jesus, meek and mild, but let's not forget, according to Romans 19:15, when he comes back, or 19:13, when Christ comes back, he will be riding a white horse and wearing his own robe dipped in blood. That is a robe that is worn by a warrior who is inflicting casualties on the foe. So this is Jesus, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. When he comes back, his robe is going to be dipped in blood because he too is a warrior.
All right, that's the first Bryan Fischer clip. Woo! Heavy, buddy. Coming out strong, dog. Real strong. Now here we go. Tom Hartman's going to interview him. And Tom Hartman is going to totally just go at him here. And Bryan Fischer is just going to sit back and go right back to his robotic talking point and self-justification that Jesus would torture. Here we go.
And when I ask myself the question, who would Jesus torture, the answer comes back pretty clearly, no one. I remember him stopping Peter after Peter cut off the ear of the soldier in Gethsemane just before the crucifixion.
Well, the enhanced interrogation techniques are not torture.
Oh, come on. Don't try and peddle that nonsense, Brian.
They're perfectly legal.
Nobody in the world is buying that.
Tom, if you don't like the law, contact your congressman and change the law. They're perfectly legal.
No, they're not. These are crimes against humanity. These are crimes. Putting somebody in a cell, pouring water on them, turning down the temperature, and letting them die is a crime.
If you were to do that in a time of peace, you would be right. In a time of war, you would be wrong.
No, I'm sorry. We executed Japanese soldiers. We executed them after World War II for waterboarding our soldiers. We called it a war crime. It was a war crime. That was in the 1950s. We executed Filipino soldiers in 1904, in 1901 for waterboarding our American soldiers in 1899 during the Spanish-American War. We have always defined these things as crimes. But that, Brian, we can have this he said, she said all day long. Who would Jesus torture in your world?
Enhanced interrogation techniques are not torture.
So who would Jesus rectally feed?
Enhanced interrogation techniques, Tom, are not torture. If you
right, I didn't use the word torture. Who would Jesus rectally feed?
Enhanced interrogation techniques are not torture. And Tom,
I didn't use the word torture, Brian. Who would Jesus rectally feed?
The Bible permits things in a time of war that it does not permit in a time of peace.
So who would Jesus rectally feed?
Enhanced interrogation techniques are not torture.
This is a technique that John Yoo and Jay Bybee say is legal. I'm not suggesting, well, I am suggesting it's torture, but I'm not defining it as such. You're responding to a question I didn't ask. question I did ask is, who would Jesus rectally feed? Who is it that you think Jesus would endorse using your, what you call, enhanced interrogation techniques? And also the Nazis called them enhanced interrogation techniques. I find that very interesting.
Well, Nancy Pelosi and Jay Rockefeller reviewed extensively every single one of these enhanced interrogation techniques and had no problem with them. I stand with Nancy Pelosi and Jay Rockefeller against you on this one, Tom.
So who would Jesus rectally feed? Who would Jesus waterboard, Bryan?
3 of the last 4 attorney generals have signed off on these enhanced interrogation techniques and said that they
You're
are
not going to answer the question.
a time of war. No, I'm answering your question. This is an enhanced.
You're saying Jesus would waterboard or rectally feed or allow to freeze to death in a prison cell anyone who isn't on the side of the United States?
Well, Tom, the Bible says when Jesus comes back, he's going to come back bearing a sword with a robe dipped in blood.
So you have chosen, Bryan, to make your version of Christianity the bloody version of Christianity, the Crusades. Do I have that right?
When Jesus returns, Tom, he will come back with a sword and a robe dipped in blood. Maybe your view of Jesus is what needs to be adjusted here.
Could be. Could be that I'm wrong, but I always thought that Jesus was the guy that loved us and that said, treat your neighbor as yourself, and that, that was the second most important commandment, the first being to love God, and who said to Peter, don't cut off any more ears. It's just apparently you and I, two people who call themselves Christians, worship completely different.
I can't believe that people are actually listening to people like Bryan Fischer. That people actually pay attention to this guy. That actually has an audience. I find it insane. But I mean, we've seen a very large rise in the radical right out of America, specifically sovereign citizens and those movements, where the whole idea where you're born sort of as you're your own nation, as an individual. Your person, you're your own sovereign individual nation. What kind of world would we live in if every single human being was their own sovereign nation and had their own foreign policy, and everyone was launching weapons? Like, what if someone had chemical or biological weapons and they had a disagreement with someone who was in proximity to another person? I mean, you'd have, if every single person on Earth was a sovereign nation, I mean, how would you ever get foreign policy done with 8 billion people in this world? And so it's this extremism that's coming out, and it's been on the rise, and it's no joke. And it's people like Bryan Fischer and others who are perpetuating this. This is not good. This is not good.